want to welcome you to this fringe event on purposeful business. And we've got an incredible lineup, and I'm really looking forward to this conversation. I'm Hamish Sandison, I'm the chair of Labour Business, co-hosting today with SME4Labour. Just a word about Labour Business. We are the business membership group affiliated to the Labour Party. We're one of the 21 socialist societies. Our members are Labour Party members in businesses up and down the country, small, medium and large in every sector. Labour Business was founded under a really catchy name in 1972. It was the 1972 Industry Committee, founded by Harold Wilson, no less, on the basis that we need to have a conversation with the business community. We don't listen to businesses, why should they listen to the Labour Party? And you may remember Harold Wilson was famous for saying that he wanted to make Labour the natural party of government. And so in a nod to our founder, we talk about making Labour the natural party of business, as on the banner. But that means the natural party not only of business, but also of workers, their trade unions, and the self-employed. And we've really been having a good conference, thanks to Ed and others, who've been talking about repositioning Labour as the pro-business party. I mean, we always were pro-business, but sometimes it's a little difficult to tell. But now we are very clearly a pro-business and a pro-worker party. And what that means, I think, is that in terms of all the debates we've been having over the conference, people are recognising that business, the private sector, as well as the social enterprise sector and charities have to be part of the solution to all the challenges we face, whether it's the pandemic recovery or the climate crisis. But businesses do ask us, our members ask us, is this for real or is it just whitewashed? Well, I mean, talk is cheap. But I was really struck by something that Keir said yesterday to the Business Forum breakfast that I attended. And he says, calling Labour a pro-business party is not just about tone, it's about attitude. But I'd be the first to recognise we've still got work to do to put the flesh on the bones of what it means to be a pro-business party. And that's where our core activities come in, of business engagement and of policy development, supporting the front bench teams and party policy units in the work that they're doing up to the next general election. And in doing that engagement work and that policy development work, we rely on experts. And that's why I'm so pleased to say that this event is sponsored by SE UK, Social Enterprise UK. We've worked very closely with them recently, along with Ed's teams, on what it means to be a purposeful business and how does the social enterprise sector possibly offer a model for that. So thank you to SE UK for co-sponsoring and indeed for being involved. So that's all I will say now, and I want to move on to introduce our panel. To my immediate left, I'm very pleased to welcome Victor Adebowale, Lord Adebowale, who is a crossbench peer. He is the chair of SE UK and also a founder and CEO of Turning Point, one of the most successful social enterprises in the UK, and I'm sure he'll talk more about that. I'd also like to introduce to my far right, geographically but not politically, Juliet Davenport. She tells me it's wrong to call her the former founder, because she's still the founder, but was the former CEO of a company called Good Energy, and she's now a member of Innovate UK, among many other things that she does. And then to my far left, again only geographically, very pleased to welcome Andrew O'Brien. Some of you heard from him at our lunchtime session with MasterCard on financial inclusion. So he's the head of policy at SE UK. And then, needing no introduction, to my immediate right, Ed Miliband, Shadow Business Secretary, among other things. So we'll start, I think, first with Victor. Would you like to, unless you're taken by surprise, you are. I can call you later if you don't want to get first. That's absolutely fine. But I thought you had, you were raring to go. You've got your braces on. We're all right. You wearing braces? Victor and I bonded when we first met on Zoom and discovered that he was wearing braces and I'd left mine behind. Not very far away. So Victor, is it okay if you kick off?
I don't mind at all, I don't mind.
Victor Adebowale,
I
please.
should correct, you always say never correct the chair, but I wasn't the founder of Turning Point.
Okay, right.
And I'm the ex-chief executive of Turning Point.
Okay, right.
I'm a recovering chief executive.
Okay, well, the record will reflect.
I am the founder of two other businesses. I am an entrepreneur, and I don't mind that. At a Labour Party conference, to be a sort of sailor and entrepreneur, I think is quite important. So, social enterprises. I'm the chair of SME4Labour, 100,000 social enterprises. How many people know what a social enterprise is? Oh, that's good. That's a lot more than usual. So let me just tell you what social enterprises are. They are businesses. They're businesses like any other business, except they have a triple bottom line. They measure their commitment to their communities and their contribution to the environment, as well as their financial operations. So it's a triple bottom line. What most of you won't know is there are 100,000 social enterprises in this country. For every £100,000 of turnover, social enterprises produce 3 jobs. Ordinary businesses produce 0.66. I bet you don't know that social enterprises are more likely to employ people that look like me as their chief exec, and I was the chief exec of a large social enterprise. Turning Point employed nearly 4,000 people, operating in 300 locations, and I turned over of 130 million by the time I left, and provided a service to 1/4 of the British public across mental health, addiction, and substance misuse, and all points in between, and still does. Right? I bet you didn't know that the top 11 taxpayers companies in this country are social enterprises, including the car group, on whose board I sit. I bet you didn't know that social enterprises actually produce more for Great Britain PLC in terms of GDP than agriculture and the entertainment industry put together. Didn't know that, did you? And the question that we ought to be asking is, in some odd way, given this is a Labour Party conference, why don't we know that? Why? I mean, we operate in most of the poorest communities in this country, employing people at the sharp end of the economic inverse scale that states that those people who need economic growth the most tend to get it the least. So why don't you know? Let me make a guess that's an answer to that question. And part of it, I have to say, and I say this to my colleagues at SME4Labour, if people don't understand you, it's 50% your problem, right? But let me talk about the other 50%, because I've just accepted blame for our 50%. I think there is a problem. You know, this country, like many other countries around the world, are at a tipping point. You don't have to be I think the point you've just made is kind of obvious. I walked out of my door this morning and people queuing up for petrol. And it reminded me of actually a period I spent in Lagos, right? Plenty of fuel, but we've got 10 years to save the planet. Inequality is growing at an alarming rate, and it's affecting our young, who should be standing on our shoulders and reaching a bit higher, more than it is the likes of us. If we keep doing what we've always done, getting what we've always got is unacceptable. So we need new thinking. We need new thinking about how we drive an economy. We need new thinking about how we balance an economy. We need new thinking about the participants in that economy. Right? And the reason why I spend so much time talking about social enterprise is that it's an obvious answer. It exists, it doesn't have to prove itself. It's the fastest growing form of business in this country. Young people understand it and are taking it up. The one thing that's missing is its central role in thinking about what the future economy of this country should look like. That's a political question. Right? That's a political question. But it always strikes me as odd how reluctant we are to take up new ideas, even when they are staring us in the face. So, the answer to the question about purposeful, I always love these questions about purposeful business because I always think about the opposite. What's a non-purposeful business? I mean, what is that? What does that look like? Right? It's not like non-purposeful business. What is that? Is that mafia? Or I don't get it. Right? There's only one kind of business that's credible that should have the support of anybody in this room, and that is a business that's purposeful. Yeah? That's contributing. It's suffering too much from businesses that don't contribute. What is the most effective form of business that contributes to your community and this economy? Well, I've just described it. So I'll end by asking the question again, and maybe during the course of this conversation we might get to a collective answer that actually is really useful to the leadership that Miliband is providing as the Shadow Business Secretary, and who knows, even the leader of the Labour Party as they enter the next election. And the question is why? Why isn't social enterprise one of the central pillars of economic policy for the Labour Party? I'll end there.
Thank you, Victor. I'll turn next to Juliet, and I think I was right in calling you the founder of your business, even though I got that wrong with Victor. But now ex-CEO of Good Energy. But would you like to give us your perspective on the question of what does purposeful business look like? Juliet Davenport.
Thank you, and thank you for inviting me today to come and talk about this. So, I started life as a business scientist. I was a physicist, I studied atmospheric prerequisites, and I got interested in climate change. And when I left university, I kind of didn't know what to do. I wanted to do something about climate change, but however hard I looked, I couldn't find anywhere to work. I could have been a scientist, to be honest, and I wasn't a brilliant scientist, which is one of the reasons I didn't stay in science. But I kind of looked around, and I went and worked. I did work a little bit in academia, I'm not great at that. I did work in government. I actually did an internship in the European Commission, worked a little bit in the European Parliament. But I think where I got to was to be able to experiment and work at pace. Actually, business seemed like a good place for me to. But there were no businesses who were looking at climate change at that point. There was nothing out there. And I was lucky enough, I met a German entrepreneur who had a similar idea and agreed to help set up this business in the UK. But again, we weren't really thinking that it was a purposeful business. It was really what we were trying to do is doing something about climate change, and business seemed like a good sort of vehicle to do that. And over time, that developed, and as we got into the business and understood the business more, we began to talk about purpose. We began to talk about why are we here? What was the purpose of this business? Because when you unpack climate change, it's quite a large question. And if you're setting up a business in it, you can't do everything. So we then started to kind of really understand who we were and what we did. And we got to a point where actually this business was about empowering individuals to do something about climate change, either in their own homes or their own businesses. And that was great. So we went out there, we had a purpose, fantastic. And we got an idea of a business. We're going to buy renewable energy and sell that to consumers. That sounds fantastic, great, purpose tick. However, not that many people want to fund a purpose-led business, particularly 20 years ago. And I remember going to see various private equity, venture capital, banks, who basically pretty much said to me, why would anybody buy your product? Why is this interesting? What is this about? What do you mean you're trying to do something to change the market? Aren't you just trying to sell something? And that was probably the most difficult part of our foundation. We were lucky enough to have already started trading at that point. We had a few customers, I think we had about 3,000 customers. And I used to sit next to the call centre and listen to some of these calls. And people would ring up and say, can we buy shares in your company? And I went, okay, that's an idea. And one of the great things about being a small enterprise is you can make lots of decisions. You can try things, get them wrong, try other things. And so we took that and we ran with it. And I remember talking to my chairman at the time, and we wrote a prospectus and we said, right, we're going to go and ask our customers to invest. And the night before we took this out, we said, oh my God, this is not going to work. What are we doing? Are we mad? And I went, no, come on, let's do it. Let's go out there. We raised £600,000 in 2 weeks from our customer base. It was an amazing feeling. It's probably the best feeling I've ever had in terms of setting up a company. Because what it really meant was that our customers truly believed in what we were doing and they wanted to be part of it. And they weren't massive shareholders, there were lots of small shareholders. And in fact, that was what founded the company in a sense. It really formed it, because what it meant was that when you were talking to your customers, you were also talking to your shareholders. And we had this kind of duality of conversation. And as we developed the business, we kind of went through, okay, so we're talking to customers, we're talking to shareholders. What about our employees? How do we bring them into this conversation? So we made sure that they could get a stake in the company as well. And actually, finally, what we defined was something called our future holders. And I wonder whether this is part of what a purposeful business is really about, is that who are you delivering this purpose to in the future? It might be the people who are already there, your customers, your shareholders, and your employees. But actually, what about the future? And I have to say, just before I left it, I was really proud that we appointed something called the Future Board. They are 6 school-aged children who have formed a small board. They advise the company, they test us, they call us out, they call out the board. And I have to say, I'm presenting at a conference tomorrow on heat, on renewable heat, and one of our future board is going to be there as well. So they are an amazing set of children. I have to say, get people in the room and start making them ask you questions, because then you think about the future as well as the present. So for me, purposeful business is really thinking about what your stakeholders are, what is the passion, what is the driving force in the middle of the business, and how do you deliver that in everything that you do as an organisation and hold yourself to account. And the last 20 years have been difficult. Running an energy company is not straightforward. If any of you read the press right now, you can see that. But it's been incredibly rewarding, and I've learned a huge amount about actually what surprises me when I go see other businesses that aren't purpose-led. And you get surprised by, 1, how people treat their staff, or 2, how they treat their customers. And you can see it coming through. Purpose actually, my personal view is, purpose is good for everybody. It's not just good for our society, it's good for those companies as well, because they get much better sort of overall performance as an organisation. So thank you.
We'll turn now to Andrew O'Brien. I think I slightly worried him lunchtime when he was speaking at another event with us. I said that as well as being a membership body of over 100,000 social enterprises, SME4Labour is also a think tank. It's got real research capability and thoughts that it can contribute to this debate. And I thought that was a compliment and not something negative. But he gave a great presentation at lunchtime, so I'm really looking forward to hearing about what he has to say on this subject. So, Andrew O'Brien, Head of Policy for SME4Labour.
Thank you very much, Hamish, and thank you all very much for coming here, and thank you very much, Ed, as well, for giving up your time. I know you've got a lot on your plate. Look, I've got a note of caution for the Labour Party, I think, and a message of hope and optimism, and I think that's what I really want to focus on. But the caution is, and Ed, I listened to your speech on Sunday, I thought it was fantastic, and a lot of good policy there, and Rachel gave a really good speech yesterday as well. I think people know the Labour Party is going to be investing in public services, it's going to invest in this country. The public get that. I think what the public don't get is what's Labour's plan for growth. How are they going to pay for this spending? What does pro-business mean? And it's not just a theoretical concern. I think if you look at the research from the last election, everybody loved Labour's policies, because no one thought they could be delivered. They didn't think they were achievable. They didn't think that investment would materialise because they weren't confident that Labour had a team and a plan in place to grow the economy to deliver that investment. And the public get in their gut that 70 to 80% of the economy is driven by the private sector. So if you don't have a vision for the private sector, how business works, you're missing the large part of the picture. And I think where Labour has to be cautious at the moment is making sure that there's enough articulation of that vision and enough articulation of that plan And I think all of the great winning Labour leaders have done that. I mean, Harold Wilson, of course, founding this organisation, but he talked about not just the white paper technology, but the need for get rid of the fuddy-duddy public school boys running big business and get experts in who actually know about that technology. If you look at Tony Blair around globalisation and need for Britain to be connected into the world to make the most of that, winning Labour leaders have that vision. And I think that what Labour needs to be doing, and where I hope you can work with Labour Business and Ed and your team as well, is to start articulating what that distinctive Labour vision, Labour offer is around the private sector. And I think that's where I want to focus on that kind of message of hope and optimism, because Ed, I think you've got the most important job in the shadow cabinet, to be brutally honest. You've got the hardest job, which is to try to undermine all those years of concern about Labour around business and actually turn it into a strength of the party to win. But what you've got on your side, I think, is that, as Victor has been talking about, and Juliet's been talking about, there's been a quiet revolution in the business world. And they're actually more aligned now with Labour's values than they've ever been at any point. And there are huge allies there, not just in the social enterprise sector, but in other parts of the private sector who get that business needs to be, as Victor said, triple bottom line with a long-term mission and purpose. And I think where Labour has another option as well is people think that Labour would back that because it's fluffy, because of course we have an ethical dimension, it's the right thing to do, and all of that is true and important. But as Juliet said, it's actually about how do we get the best out of this economy, how do we get growth and jobs and investment. And as Victor said, social enterprises are twice as likely to be growing as other forms of SMEs, twice as likely to be innovating, more likely to be paying the living wage, more likely to be investing in their people and their staff. I don't want to maybe talk about a competitor necessarily, but you look at B Corp, for example, again, all the research shows they're growing faster than other SMEs. So purpose is about how do we get the best out of the talent and the opportunity that exists in our economy at the moment. And purpose is about better business, better decision making, more long-termism, and creating the kind of economic system that we want to see going forward. It's not just a fluffy optional extra. And so I think there is a distinctive historic opportunity, there is a moment for Labour to capture that. I don't think the Conservatives get this. I think they have a very old-fashioned way of looking at business, about greed and about very short-term focus on profitability. So there is a bit of an open pitch for Labour if it's prepared to gamble and to take that opportunity to put it, as Victor said, at the heart of its economic narrative. But that's all great in theory, but I suppose thinking about the brass tacks of delivery. I know Keir, like myself, is a football fan. Ed, I think you're more of a baseball fan, perhaps. But I think what people get is that the government at the moment is basically a spectator, really, in the economy. It shouts from the sidelines about backing business, but it doesn't have anything to contribute to that. What we need is a government that's going to coach this economy. We need Labour to discover it's kind of inner Jurgen Klopp or Pep Guardiola, or in my case, Alex Ferguson. You want somebody who's actually got a vision, a philosophy, a plan on how you extract the best out of the private sector. And that's where Purposeful Business comes in. It's a credible option to say, well, look, this is the kind of economy, this is the kind of private sector that the Labour Party is going to build. We're going to put in place the plan, the coaching to get us to that point. And we're not just going to spectate and wait on the sidelines. And there's substance to it as well. And we're working with Labour Business around this. But there's a procurement system. I think Rachel and Ed have spoken very eloquently about buying British, buying green. There's more that we can do around strengthening the social value act and other opportunities in that space. We've got company law. I know, Ed, you've written about the Better Business Act in your book, but there's a tool there where we can make what Juliet's doing, which should be standard practice, across all parts of our economy. We also got a reporting system. I thought your policy announcement, Ed, around getting more climate disclosure would be good. It's exactly the kind of thing we need. We also need social disclosure as well. Because when the information is out there, in the public domain, it breeds competition, it gives customers and consumers more power, and it makes British business function more effectively. Startup finance as well. We should be prioritising investment into startups like Juliet, into social enterprises, where there is a huge rate of return. But unfortunately, we're kind of just dishing out cash without that targeting. We're not thinking proactively about the kind of business, the kind of economy we want to see. And finally, the last bit, I think, which is a real missed opportunity, particularly given everything we hear about levelling up and global Britain and trade. Social enterprises are twice as likely to be exporting overseas than other forms of business. And yet the government is cutting back on things like the British Council, which have been engaging with social enterprises and spreading that across the world. And there's an opportunity for Labour to make this actually not about a British story, but about British leadership in the global economy, and how we can be a centre, once again, for that new form of business revolution that's taking place. It's going to be bigger than the industrial revolution to some extent, because it's so much more pervasive. And so that's my conclusion, I guess, the caution and optimism. I think if Labour can get that balance of being trusted, which I think it is around public investment in public services and the need to invest in jobs, but can get that pitch right and be trusted on the private sector, entrepreneurship, business, but authentically so. Because it can't just be Labour saying we're pro-business, because people will go, well, Tories say they're pro-business. And also, there will be that suspicion of why is Labour pro-business. It needs to be an authentic, powerful message. And I think social enterprise, purposeful economy, has got the potential to be that authentic, trusted message that Labour needs on their business side. And if you can get those two things together, you've got your best possible chance of winning in the next election. So thanks very much for your time.
Thank you, Andrew. The next speaker needs no introduction, but I would just echo what Andrew said. We are incredibly fortunate in the Labour Party to have Ed in this crucial role as Shadow Business Secretary, and incredibly fortunate in Labour Business. He's been such a great colleague, such a great collaborator. His office teams are working with us in a very generous way to help develop the evidence base for the policies that will win the next election. So it gives me huge personal pleasure and pleasure for all of us to welcome to this event the Shadow Secretary of State for Business, Ed Miliband.
Well, I want to stand up with the man with the camera so I can't. So I'm going to stay seated. Look, it's great to be at this event, and I really want to thank Juliet and Victor and Andrew and you, Hamish, for the invitation for being on this panel. And I want to thank Labour Business for the great work you do, SME4Labour, and also Social Enterprise UK. You sort of gave my potted history at the beginning, and one thing you missed out was I was the Minister for Social Enterprise. It was my first ministerial job, and I absolutely loved it. This feels like a sort of trip down memory lane in some respects. And I remember the sort of great social enterprises like say Direct Divine Chocolate, Hackney Community Transport, Eat Project, just a whole plethora of social enterprises that I worked with at the time. Andrew, I really liked what you said. I sort of felt I'm going to vote for Andrew at the end of this. Because you sort of in ways stole some of my thunder. Let me just make a few points, and then I'd really like to hear from the audience. Look, so I was the Minister for Social Enterprise. I think why was I so enthusiastic about that job? It was because I saw people who, through the private sector, were delivering on so many of the values that I held dear and was trying to execute for government around a fairer country, a more sustainable country, and a more productive country. And that was what inspired me. And if you, lots of people here will know the social enterprises. I think you've heard it from Juliet, from Victor, and also from Andrew. People who work in social enterprises are incredibly inspiring people. I mean, just incredibly inspiring. And sometimes you find I can often meet a lot of people who've been in the conventional private sector, if I can put it that way, and they go into social enterprises and they say, well, that was okay working in the normal private sector, conventional private sector, but I really wanted to do more to put my values into practice. The first thing. So, secondly, then, this is where I share Andrew's view. I think that something very profound has happened in the 10 years since I was a social enterprise, 10 years or so since I was a social enterprise minister, which is that those values of social enterprise have migrated much, much more into the way that other businesses think about their role in our society. And I think that is the sort of revolution. It's almost like, the sort of social enterprise idea has been far more successful than I think we could possibly have imagined a decade ago. And you find so many businesses now, and this is the whole purpose-led business idea, talking about this, and many of them doing it. Some of them talking about it, not doing it, but most of them talking about it and seeking to do it. And it seemed almost slightly eccentric, almost 10 years ago, to be saying, we've got the triple bottom line. It doesn't seem eccentric anymore. It seems entirely conventional, almost a sort of cliche and a commonplace. And I think that is a sort of massive transformation. And I think it sort of reflects, what we all see in our society, frankly. Because if you see the climate crisis and the inequality crisis and all of the other things that we face, how can you look at those, what's going on, and think to yourself, okay, well, business as usual is the way to go. If you think to yourself, well, okay, we want to contribute to tackling these problems. And I just hear that sort of so often from business people that I talk to. So firstly, I'm very enthusiastic for the sector. Secondly, I think the sector's kind of idea and ideals have migrated quite a long way across business. Agri, you mentioned people, not just people, beyond that. So what then, if we kind of like this idea, is at the end of the meeting, it's happening, and good. No, because I think the third point I would make is that we have a set of systems which push against those ideals, not in favour. We have a model of the way our financial system works, our company law works, our disclosure regime works, which tends towards short-term value extraction, not long-term sustainable, inclusive wealth creation. And I sort of think that, instead of kind of taking a view on the motives of people who are running businesses, I think we should, for the most part, think that people actually want to do the right thing, but we need a system that encourages them to do the right thing rather than discourages them to do the right thing. And so for Labour and for me in this job, this is where it's at. I mean, this whole issue of, I'm going to be saying more about this in the coming weeks, this whole issue of purposeful business and how we have a set of institutions that encourage rather than discourage purposeful business. And Section 172 of the Companies Act is sort of one, 2006 Companies Act is one aspect of this, and whether you've got a stakeholder model or a more narrow shareholder value model. But that's not the only part of it. That's if you like, sort of linchpin of it. It goes well beyond that. And the whole idea of the Better Business Act is, I think, a very good one. But I think what we want to do is go through our systems and our institutions and think, how do we reform and change these institutions so it encourages business to do the right thing rather than discouraging business to do the right thing? And I actually don't think this is a particularly party political, or should be a particularly party political idea. I think you're right, the Conservatives are more worried about it, but I think it can be really influence on a broad coalition and with the support of a broad coalition of people. Two other things to sort of say. First, I agree with you, Andrew, that simply saying you're pro-business isn't enough for it. Because people are sort of like, okay, fine, and Hamish is very good on this, fine, but what does that actually mean? But we pro-business in what way? And I think that you see, I think what's interesting about the triple bottom line, the whole idea of purpose-led business, is exactly what you said. The people who, and I say this because of the business people I listen to, is people who advocate for this, advocate for it. Yes, they want to help the planet, yes, they want to help their workforce, but they think they can have more successful businesses as a result. More successful businesses because they attract the right employees, more successful businesses because they attract customers, more successful businesses because it's about long-term value creation, not short-term wealth extraction. And so it's sort of pro-business because it's a better, more sustainable model of creating wealth in our society. And I think it's a sort of, so I think it is more than it's not a platitude. I think there's a real substance behind it, but I completely agree with you that there needs to be substance behind it. Last thing I'll say on this is we're going to do this because we face these absolutely monumental challenges. I mean, there's absolutely no way we're going to tackle the climate crisis without business being an indispensable and essential partner. And every day that goes by that we don't do more with more urgency, with greater intent to tackle the climate crisis is another day when we are leaving a terrible legacy to future generations. So it's and I can also say this, just as sort of an observation. not just about the climate crisis. You know, in 2015, let me just put it this way, in 2015, some people in business looked at the choice between me and Cameron and said, Miliband is clearly the riskier choice. I'm not sure that's the way it turned out. In a way, I think this is really important, which is that if we don't answer these deep issues of inequality, deprivation, people being left out of their economy, left out of our economy, you know, we produce very, very bad and dislocating outcomes which we need for business. And so, you know, it's the right thing to do morally, but it's the right thing to do economically to confront the crises that we face. And I think social enterprise and purposeful business is absolutely the heart.
Thank you so much, Ed. I'm going to call for questions and comments. Brief ones, please. Just pick up one thing you said, Ed, about 172 of the Companies Act. Just to let people know who are interested, we're not going to have a big debate today about corporate governance, but there's some work that one of our policy groups has done, which is on our website, about the need for company law reform. We believe there is a need for change in companies law. It's not the only answer, but it's part of the solution. So do have a read of that if you're interested in what mechanisms exist or could be improved to encourage that long-term view rather than the short-termist sort of quarterly capitalism, as Hillary Clinton called it, that we now suffer from. So, questions and comments. I'll take them in threes. Be nice to know who you are and where you're from if you want to share that with us. And I want some gender balance. I see 4 men with their hands up. That's not good enough. No, so we'll go for yes. Okay. Gentleman there first.
If you want a mic, there is
And there is a roving mic. And then colleague there, yes, to your right there, yes, Liz, just behind you is the next speaker, and then the next speaker there in the yellow sweater. Right, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. I'm Lever on public sector and bonds. Just going to say, I think this is potentially really, really impactful strand of the warm push reporting. The main thing, picking up a bit to points, it's around the fact that we have to call it social enterprise to distinguish it from enterprise as it is now, because effectively the companies manage the interests of their shareholders kind of at the expense of all the stakeholders, and that's a reflection of control being exercised by stakeholders. But one thing that would be good to talk about are mechanisms by which we can encourage businesses to be a bit more kind of active in this space, and possibly kind of arguments around paying real living wage, investment, these sorts of things, which make the points we were making earlier about kind of a positive growth case that the Labour Party can make. One of the ones I'd be interested in your views on is like a variable rate corporation tax, which potentially incentivises sort of businesses to take decisions that are, you know, essentially you pay a higher rate of corporation tax if you're doing things that are negative for society more broadly. You could link that to things like climate change, you could link that to things like do you pay a living wage to your supply chain?
Thank you. Yes. Colleague here. Liz, just, oh, you got it. Right. Great. Fire away.
Hi, I'm Natalie Burns. I'm a CLP delegate from Arundel and South Downs, and I'm a business owner as well, to your point of saying if you're an entrepreneur in the Labour Party. You've mentioned social enterprise.
What's your business, Natalie?
This is my pitch opportunity. It's United Us, we're a branding agency. We're in Brighton. So we've mentioned social enterprises and B corporations. We haven't mentioned ESG ratings, which I know that organisations like S&P are now really promoting the interest returns that you're getting from high ESG rating performance organisations. But what I really want to understand is your perspective on how do we actually talk with a common language to the public about all of these things that help them to really help them understand these business models and their returns.
Thanks, Natalie. And then the colleague here in yellow.
Hi, my name is Adebowale. I'm a delegate here representing Vauxhall. I'm also a trainee solicitor at Allen & Overy. and I worked in climate, environment and international trade and sanctions. I just wanted to ask a little bit about business within the labour movement. Arguably, business is a bit of a dirty word amongst lots of factions in the labour movement. How much of the battle is to win with the public against winning within the labour movement when it comes to purpose-driven, high-road business and industry? Thanks.
Thanks very much. Nice short questions and comments. So I'm going to go in the same order, Victor, Juliet, Andrew and Ed. I think, there may be an opportunity at that point for you, Ed, to move on, or hopefully you can stay long for another round. But Victor, would you like to take all or any of those questions?
So on the question of how you talk to the public are already with us, but they get it. I mean, that's why social enterprises are growing so quickly, particularly amongst the young, in areas of poverty. Frankly, I think they're waiting for politicians to catch up. I honestly think that, and I see it all the time. So I think people know that there's an imbalance now between their needs and the needs of many corporates. I mean, they know it, and certainly the young do. So I actually don't think it's about changing the language. It's about actually speaking louder, speaking with more confidence, picking up on what's already out there, to be honest. I don't really think it needs a change of language. I do think there are some things that we could do. So, for instance, social enterprises are currently in the remit of DCMS. So I'm on the board of the Co-op Group, nationwide. These are some of the biggest companies in the country. And the department that looks after their policies, DCMS.
Time for a land grab.
No. It's a market signal, isn't it? If you've got, I've described to you how big social enterprises are, what they contribute to the country. It surely is a signal to those businesses that they're looked after by the same department that looks after whether you can see Macbeth at the theatre tonight. Come on. That makes no sense, does it? This should be part of biz and part of the Treasury, and there should be spoken for from that position. It's not rocket science. So make that move, speak up for what's already going on. It's not a big bet, to be honest. People get it.
Thanks, Victor. Juliet.
If I talk to the entrepreneurial question, one of the things that I'm really excited about now that I see coming through is the movement of a youth entrepreneur, and I see more purposeful entrepreneurs than I've ever seen before. There's various different groups where you're kind of seeing this cohort come through and say, we're not happy in just setting up any old business. We want to set up a business with a social or environmental purpose. And I think overall there's more we can do to help them. So I really think we need to think about, there's already systems like the British Business Bank, Innovate Edge, all these different organisations that already exist within government, which already provides funding, but we're not channeling them into these areas enough. And I think we can help those organisations. If you have a social purpose or an environmental purpose, then you should be getting more benefit out of some of the systems that already exist. And we should be encouraging them. I think there's true excitement from Generation Z about what they can do and giving them the confidence to go out there. And the worst thing about setting up a business is that first stage of running out of money. And so if we can just give them some security about that first part, it can really blossom. Because the SME sector is one of the biggest sectors in the UK. It employs more people than any other sector. And yet, when you talk at government level, it's all the CEOs of very large corporates who are the ones always talking to ministers. So we need to see grow the underneath and make sure we look after the middle.
Thanks, Juliet. Andrew, quick response from you.
Yeah, sure. Just a couple of bits. I think in terms of the kind of levers point you mentioned about corporation tax, I think our whole tax system needs to be redesigned. It's got kind of Georgian origins. We used to tax windows and things like that because they were there, right? And it's the same with business. We have corporation tax because it's there. And I think we need to get towards a system where we are judging companies on social and environmental performance. And I think you made a great point. Why is a business like, the cooperative group, for example, nationwide, which are putting all its money back into communities, paying tax rates the same as the company which is extracting its money out of communities? It doesn't seem to make sense. So there are ways we can use the tax system to get that balance. I think that's given a really good point about ESG, actually. And I think one of the things we haven't heard from is that we've got a huge financial services industry in this country. We are a world leader in finance, but and there's all these ESG funds out there, trillions of dollars out there, but they can't find the ESG businesses to actually invest in. So we have the ridiculous situation where we have low carbon funds investing in oil and gas because there aren't enough low carbon businesses to actually invest in the first place. So Labour has an opportunity here, the levelling up agenda and everything around that. If we make the UK the home for purposeful businesses, ESG proper businesses, you can attract trillions of dollars worth of investment because they've got nowhere else to go. They can't go to the US, they can't go to Europe because those businesses don't exist. We could be the ones to pioneer those. And I think Victor, I'm going to plug a piece of work that Victor's doing at the moment. He's doing a commission into social investment to look at this access to finance work. And I think that the key message that commission will have is that social enterprises are here, there is huge potential here. Let's get that investment flowing into them. And it's a win-win for everybody. It's a win for the investors because they can get their money back into growth. It's a win for the country so we can get that change. It's a win for entrepreneurs like you and Natalie because you can get the finance you need. And in terms of the finance pattern of the Labour Party, I mean, I'm not a member of the Labour Party. It's not really, maybe it's not my place to say so. From an outsider's perspective, what I would say is that, I think Dan Norris was on the panel earlier, he said very well, which is that you need, people want wealth, they want jobs, they want opportunities. That's what the Labour Party's mission is. Its historic mission has always been to level up, really, to bring growth and opportunities to people. And you need business to do that. And that's why I mentioned that coaching analogy. Ultimately, the state can't kick the ball into the back of the net. Businesses have to do that. What you need is a government which is getting them to the position where they can score as regularly and as frequently as possible. And as Victor said, there's an opportunity for social enterprise and purposing because the public and the country get it. It can unite people from every walk of life. Tories like it, Labour likes it, Lib Dems like it, voters of all types like it. So there is a real historic opportunity for Labour to unite around a vision of business, which is totally aligned with its values. The public gets it, the public likes it, and the policy, as Ed said, the substance is there as well. It just needs to be put, I would say, more front and centre of what they would say. Every message about the state investing in something, I think we need another message from Labour going, and we're going to get the private sector to reform and do this as well. So that way the message is balanced and the public can trust Labour in business.
Thank you, Andrew. I withdraw my comment about you being a think tanker. You're really a politician. And I want to call on Ed. Ed has to get away after this round of questions. We'll carry on with one more round, but Ed, we'd really love to hear from you before you have to.
Yeah, and apologies, I'm going to go to another event. So, really great question. On the corporation tax, I would definitely be vaporised by the Treasury if I said yes, you are. They definitely need to look at the incentives in the system about what we're rewarding and what we're not rewarding. I think that point is really well taken. Natalie, your point about ESG ratings, my observation about this would be that these ESG ratings are a mess, aren't they? I mean, it is an absolute mess and a maze of kind of what you're supposed to be paying attention to, what ratings you trust. And there's a real role for government here, Hamish and I were just discussing it. There's a real role for government in setting some clear standards so that the public, investors, others know what's going on. I think this is partly what our work over the coming year or so is going to be looking at. I just want to end on the last question about the Labour Party. So thanks to Hamish and Labour Business, Keir and I have taken a really quite an important initiative, which is to have a business liaison officer in each local constituency Labour Party. And I think this is the first for the Labour Party. Mm-hmm. And it's precisely to get at the point that you're getting at, which is that we want to be the party of private enterprise as well as the public sector. And I think the place to start with people is locally. Because I actually think that, and this is not trying to categorise small business, good business, big business at all, but I'm just thinking about where people are coming from on this, is that I think if you start with people's local experience, wherever they are in the Labour Party, they have actually quite strong affinities with their local businesses. And Janet is actually quite well named, we haven't made this yet, but this whole issue of purpose. I mean, most of the businesses that I have in Doncaster would be thinking like where I am, my constituency would be, they wouldn't say I'm a purpose-led business, but they're doing it in practice. They care about their local community, they care about local people, and they want to do the right thing on the environment. So I think yes, you're right that there's work to be done in the Labour Party on this. please do become the local business liaison officer in your local CLP, because I think we want, between now and the next election and beyond, we want to build those links, and I think building those links from the bottom up is the right way for us to go. I think can make a real difference. Last thing I'll just say, Hamish, thank you to you and colleagues for having been part of this event before I have to go, but this is a continuing conversation. This is a continuing conversation because by the time of the next conference, we want to move forward this agenda very significantly on our approach and sort of answering this question about how we're going to have the kind of business that we need.
Thank you, Ed. I'll say what I said at the earlier event today. We don't believe in one-off events. We believe in a continuing conversation with business within the Labour Party in engaging with the whole business community. So there will be more of these post-conference. Just to say also, Ed will be at our reception at 6:30 in the Lancaster room, so you have a chance to see him again, along with Rachel Reeves and Emily Thornbury and Francis O'Grady and many others. So I hope you'll join us then. I will take just a very quick round of questions for the panel that still remains, if that's okay with you guys. Yeah, so three more, and Liz has the mic. There's a colleague in the front here, and another colleague in the front here. We'll take two. That's good enough. Over to you.
What positives and negatives have you learned regarding COVID in business?
COVID in business, yes. Ask your question or make a comment.
Thank you very much for your talk today. It's been really great to hear. I just wondered what you thought about the way in which we value businesses going into the future, because I feel that if we want any sort of hope of fixing any of the ecological issues at the moment, social disparity, economic disparity, international tensions, then would there be a place to have a rethink about the way in which we value a business? So, for example, to a layperson like me, I might know roughly a couple of markers about the way in which we value a business, so their turnover and their profit. Or when it comes to a nation, I might know about its general GDP and its debt. Do you think there would be a way of creating markers that acknowledge the environmental contributions, for example, the social contributions of a company, so that if we could shift our way of thinking to the system?
Great, thank you for that. Let's do it in reverse order. Final comments. First Andrew, then Juliet, then Victor. Andrew, would you like to say something of this one?
Yeah, both. I mean, on COVID, the fascinating thing is that social businesses, purposeful businesses, have been more resilient through COVID. They're less likely to fail. Cooperative businesses are exactly the same. To survive. And I think the reason why is that people value them. Consumers value them. And they know that they're, with respect, no one's going out on the streets with walls to say, please close walls, because what's the man, isn't it? Just profit for somebody else. But when there's social enterprises at risk, or co-ops, people are passionate about them because they feel like they're their businesses. This is my high street, this is my business, and I want to see it succeed. So there's a resilience there, which I think has come out from COVID, and actually we've seen a huge boom in startups for social enterprises as well, because again, people are thinking exactly like the gentleman said in his question. All the crisis going on, as Ed said, we can't do business as usual. We have to do something better than that. And social enterprise is the better than that, and they want to do it. And on the valuation of companies, there's loads of ways we can do it, but I think we need to get to a position where, when you're looking at the value of a company, and it can be expressed in monetary terms, but we don't just have to think about the profit of the company. It's about its economic impact, its social impact. And people are doing that. There's some excellent work taking place in the accounting profession to aggregate all this information together. But we need to get back to the very core of business, which is, I was on a panel with somebody the other day, I think they mentioned the Latin for business is to break bread, isn't it? It's to put communal activity of people solving problems together. And that's the core of business. It's always been the core of business. It's just that over the last 30, 40 years we've forgotten that. And that's what we need to do, is to rediscover that and value it on that basis. But it can technically be done, it should be done. And hopefully with Ed, it sounds like Hamish, that we've got a commitment to think with him and work with him to figure out how to do it in practice.
I think we do. Juliet, would you like to Did you all last comments on the
Yeah, so
or any other points that you want to raise?
thank you very much. Thank you for the questions. I mean, I'm going to look at the COVID question from looking after people's staff particularly, and what we looked at the positives and negatives of COVID. So I think the first positive that we saw out of COVID was the fact that the belief systems around people not being able to work from home and work flexibly were completely destroyed. And that was fantastic. Because what it meant to me is we managed to get 300 people working from home within 2 days. They were working at home, they were completely functioning well. And it was, I mean, first of all, I was so proud of the team. And secondly, everybody started to have a different lifestyle. They looked after their kids more, they were more integrated into their real lives. And so I think that was a huge positive. I think some of the negatives have been some of the mental health issues related to particularly people who maybe don't have families, who live on their own, or had to work in difficult circumstances. So we kind of think through those balances. And the whole burnout piece, where people actually were just continuing to work and not being able to take time out and take a holiday. So from a people point of view, there's been some fantastic learnings about what the future workforce could look like and what the future workplace could look like. And I think what I would hope not only to get from social enterprise is actually a more holistic way of looking after employees and thinking about how our lives are balanced between work and home. And then come to the investor point. It's a really interesting point. I think what we're seeing more and more is directors having to take duties around thinking about risk. Now, climate change is a standard risk now you have to consider on a listed company for a risk report. So we are already beginning to embed some of these pieces. And I think where policy and government can help is by keeping companies to account on what are the potential downsides if they don't start to fulfill more social purpose, and putting a framework around it so they see it as a risk. And then as soon as you see something as a risk, that gets priced into the valuation of the company. And that's really a really effective way of looking at things like that.
Thanks, Juliet. Victor, last word to you.
Well, positive negatives on I've worked that many positives actually, because so the positives were communities realised that looking up, there wasn't much to see, they had to look out, and then they had to sort of build together. That was a positive. The negatives were virtually everything else. So what it did draw around the country was deep red lines around poverty and social exclusion, which we have to pay attention to. You know, that's the way it is. And Andrew's the expert on the detail. When it comes to social enterprises, we survive. But it's worth knowing, 40% of all nearly 40% of all community health services are social enterprises. So if you want to save the NHS, save social enterprises. And they were there in their communities, delivering food, making sure that people got injections, actually delivering fundamental basic health services during the COVID crisis, while battling the lack of attention, frankly, that the government gave them in terms of PPE and finance. So, social enterprise is actually the bedrock of the COVID recovery. Many of my colleagues, my friends actually in Turning Point, used to be colleagues, were actually the sharp end of COVID. And we owe them a debt of gratitude. And we should reward that by taking their business model seriously.
So will you be putting anything in place because of those things?
Absolutely. Well, social enterprise, so SE UK have absolutely. In fact, one of the positive wins of SE UK was getting social enterprises recognised as important for the distribution of PPE, because that was a hell of a fight. I mean, I'm going to the chapter detail. On the second question, how you value a business. Well, there's a couple of things that the government needs to do, and I hope that Ed and others will do. First of all, in order to value something, we have to value the earth in order for it to be priced into the value of a company. And we don't do that, which is why we've got 10 years to save the planet. And the second thing we need to do is we need to value people as opposed to just seeing them as commodities. So actually the values of a company, its culture, are an asset. In all the businesses that I've set up, we actually value culture as an important part of what we measure and what we contribute. So, and with Juliet, what the government should be doing is putting a framework around that. So it's not possible to greenwash or whitewash or enterprise wash. Because while I agree with Ed that social enterprises cultures have leaked into other businesses, where I would slightly part companies, that it's not always real. And that's where government can play a part in ensuring that it is real. You can't
Thank you, Victor. We're going to call this to a close now. I want to just say that if you'd like to carry on the conversation, and with Ed, we want to have a continuing conversation from now until the general election and beyond. And just go to our website, sign up, join if you wish to become part of our policy group. So please do stay in touch. Can I just end with a big thank you to our panelists who are fantastic, to our